Joe Rogan went on the Dan Le Batard show, which is part of ESPN, and discussed the pissing match that went on between Conor McGregor and the UFC and put into a little more context as to why Conor McGregor lost that pissing match, and also kind of what we've been saying on this platform as well as some other platforms as to why Conor McGregor would try to go up against the UFC and pretty much lost. Have a listen.
What do you make of the mess that McGregor made here for UFC 200?
Well, ultimately, it's not really going to matter. Honestly, I think it's much ado about nothing. It's too bad that he's not a part of UFC 200 because it would have been amazing to see him on that card. But I think ultimately that fight will get made, probably in UFC 202. So it'll just be a couple months later that he'll wind up fighting Nate Diaz, or he'll fight somebody else. Conor's not done. It's just, look, they had a pissing contest, and Conor lost. It's really that simple. He just decided that he was going to put his foot down and tell the UFC he wasn't doing any media obligations, and the UFC said, well, that's not how it works.
Who's won one of those against Dana? Who's the one that won one of those?
You don't win those things against the UFC.
Right.
They don't want to be in a contest with you. So if you engage in a contest with them, they have to set a precedent that they're not there to engage in contests with fighters. They're there to promote fights.
I like what Joe Rogan's going to say. I mean, I do listen to his podcast. He speaks his mind, speaks the truth quite a lot of the time.
Speaks for a long time.
Yeah, I don't always agree with him, but in this example, I do. But I don't agree that Conor McGregor necessarily lost.
Oh, no, he lost.
No, I think the fans lost.
Okay, but if this is a win, okay, yeah, the fans lost because you don't get to see him in UFC 200, but McGregor lost.
But in terms of what do you gauge as a loss?
I gauge that you back Conor McGregor too much.
No, I gauge that he's lost in terms of what? Like he got what he came into the sport for.
He faked a retirement as a power move to use his leverage as being this media darling, to which he thought he was the one person, because he's brought in, to his credit, more money than any other UFC superstar. He said, I'm going to put an end to this. I think that because I have brought in X amount of dollars, more so than anybody else in the UFC's history, I get to focus more on training. I don't need to do the media tour. Therefore, I get to be the first person to not have to go through these obligations. So we decided to retire. Dana White took him off the UFC 200 card. And when McGregor and him kind of sat down and, we're all good, but he's not fighting at UFC 200 because he said, if you don't do your media obligations, you don't fight, McGregor lost. McGregor winning that means he's on the UFC 200 card. McGregor not on the UFC 200 card means that he went up. You can't possibly think that McGregor won this.
No, I'm not saying it. I'm trying to define what you mean as a loss. I'm talking about
a loss is he didn't get what he wanted. He retired to make the point that he was big enough that he didn't need to do media tour obligations, unlike any other UFC fighter. Dana White said no.
And is the UFC going to obtain anywhere near the amount of gate as they expect during that for the UFC 200?
We'll find out at UFC 200.
They won't. It's a simple fact.
No, they're not going to make as much. We don't know how much money it's going to make.
I can tell you that based on statistics of the Conor McGregor, not just gate, I'm talking about ticket sales, I'm talking about filling the arena. Conor McGregor sells superior to any other fighter.
Okay, arena's already filled for the same price as it was with Conor McGregor or Conor McGregor off the card. It's not the arena ticket sales, it's the pay-per-view buys. And yes, they're not going to be able to sell as much. But they don't care, because again, the one thing that has to be understood here is with or without Conor McGregor, the UFC still makes a fuck ton of money, and they're still going to make a fuck ton of money. And he's going to fight at UFC 202, and that's going to break more records, and they're going to make even more money. But this idea that without Conor McGregor, the UFC dies like boxing is completely asinine.
No, but it's not asinine because he's the type of personality that makes the sport what it is and pushes the sport further. Without Conor McGregor, the sport is nowhere, I've talked about this, it's nowhere near as prominent as what it has been in the UK. And if you're hindering someone like that, which I agree, he doesn't deserve any special treatment. I'm not saying that he didn't lose it. I'm saying when Dana White, for a man that we know is driven by money, he's going to view it when he sees the gate come in, which I am positive, and I'll go on record and say that he's not going to make as much money in that fight.
The gate won't make as much money. You're right about that.
So I think that, and he's going to miss that I would say aura that has been around every one of Conor McGregor's fights. The Irish fans coming in, that kind of just mob mentality that helps sell the sport and make it more marketable, I wouldn't say that it's a clear win for Dana White. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that, I'm not defending Conor McGregor to the point of like, oh no, he's got his message across. In the next fight, you know what's going to happen? Conor McGregor's not going to have to show up. No, the rules are still going to be the same. But Dana White's not going to come out unscathed. He's going to come out scathed in the way that he doesn't like to be scathed, and that's his wallet.
You make a good point, an understandable point, that he's not going to make as much money. But this idea that without Conor McGregor entirely, the UFC doesn't survive has to die. Because the reason being, without Conor McGregor, basically, the UFC still moves on. It still is going to gain momentum through future fighters and future guys. Like, I mean, look, I don't know how many times I can say this. Anderson Silva gets knocked out. Every single headline, can the UFC succeed without Anderson Silva? Guess what? It fucking did. GSP retires. Can the UFC succeed without GSP? Guess what? It fucking did. Conor McGregor does this entire pissing match, loses to Dana White, gets taken off the UFC 200 card, will fight at UFC 201 or 202 or 203. But one day, Conor McGregor isn't going to exist, and somebody else will come in and take that place. When Ronda Rousey went down, can the UFC survive without Ronda Rousey? How many times do we need to go through this cycle that people have this idea that without Conor McGregor, we're not going to watch the UFC? I've seen a million comments in our own threads. I've seen a million comments on forums, on MMA Fighting, on the MMA Hour, on SureDog, on forums, that it's split. There are the Conor McGregor fans who came in just because of Conor McGregor. Mm-hmm. Those people will go. Just like the people that die hard went for Anderson Silva and GSP. But you know who's left? An insane foundation of UFC fans.
And name me those.
That won't ever go anywhere.
Name me those UFC fighters that gather that same loyal audience in the UK. Oh wait, there's fucking no one in the UK.
And guess what? The UFC was doing
Anderson Silva.
pretty fine before that.
Bye-bye Anderson Silva. Rafael dos Santos. Bye-bye Rafael dos Santos. Jose Aldo. All Brazilian fighters that come in. Same with the Americans.
Jose Aldo did it for 10 years.
That's what I'm saying. So there's an abundance of Brazilian.
Conor McGregor's been around for 18 months.
There's a bunch of Brazilian fighters that have been able to carry the weight in their name and make the sport relevant in Brazil. It's like saying that people in the fucking Philippines are going to watch boxing without Manny Pacquiao. No, they're fucking not. They want to watch it because they follow people who they love, who they're personal with, who they have ties to. I'm saying that Conor McGregor is different because there's not been a fighter in the UK that's even sold out arenas in Vegas in the UFC. Name me who. Name me another UFC fighter from the UK or Ireland.
I can't tell you one UFC event that hasn't been sold out.
But I'm asking, is there another fighter in the UK in the UFC who is from the UK who sells out arenas and drags that name, which hasn't been able to crack that market yet, across there?
I think you're making the point that the UFC can't survive without the UK.
No, I'm saying the UFC wants to grow substantially. They want to grow to places like that because no fans follow that.
They have. They've grown in the UK because of Conor McGregor. They've grown in Brazil because of Jose Aldo and Anderson Silva and Rafael dos Anjos. They're going to grow in other places like China. They're going to go places everywhere, in the Philippines, wherever these UFC fighters come from. But it's not like the Conor McGregor is this all-out king.
I'm not saying, not once have I said that they will just completely die out without Conor McGregor.
I'm
just saying that he's a larger asset than what you're leaning to. That's what I think.
I don't think it's even a speed bump for the UFC. And the reason I know that is because the UFC started at what? Being valued at $2 million, and now potentially at least Forbes put him as $3.5 billion? You think that jump is because of Conor McGregor?
No, but he makes the sport a lot more relevant in different places than what they're relying to.
Of course he does. He makes it relevant in one specific location where they want to grow.
Well, why is
But you think those fans that came over because of no Conor McGregor, that they're not going to have fights in the UK? They're not going to stage events in the UK with premier fighters that they have right now?
Well, they will, but that's
and they're not going to sell out because there's no McGregor?
They'll owe it to Conor McGregor.
All of it to Conor McGregor?
To getting that fan base.
You liked the UFC. You liked the UFC before Conor McGregor.
I know I did, but I've grown so much more
there's
attached
nobody
to
else
it because
like
it's a personable fighter that I relate to.
Of course, I'm not taking away from his personality, but this idea that he lost. He absolutely lost. He lost to Dana White. Dana White loses some money. That doesn't mean Conor McGregor wins because his goal was to leverage Dana White. And what happened? He failed. He failed at leveraging him. He failed at making his point. And now there's an insane amount of people out there who think that, no offense, that are making your argument that, no, I think Dana White lost because they're not going to make as much money.
I never said that once. But why? So
you said in the beginning. You said in the beginning.
If I could speak, you cut me off before I can even finish a fucking point of my argument. But it's similar, Jay. It's like what? So who else in this UFC that you say continues to thrive Even mention someone who has the social media following like Conor McGregor has in this 18-month span that you go, oh, he's only been here in the 18 months. So who else has gained that amount of traction around his name? Who else has done it? Who else has made this sport so relevant in the only period of time that he's been involved in? You're looking at people like Jorge Aldo, who's been in the sport for 11 years, like you just said. He's a huge asset because he's only been in the industry for this 18 months and had these so-called not that important fights where he's just discarded people apart from Nate Diaz, who he had to face against. I'm saying he's bigger. He's a lot bigger of an asset than what you're mentioning here. That Dana White, it would be no skin off his nose if he lost Conor McGregor. I just don't believe that because he's a businessman. He's a businessman and he understands that Conor McGregor is an asset that's needed. And that when he goes, if he wants to take a fight to the UK or to Ireland, then Conor McGregor's they're going to sell out arenas in Ireland because that's where they wanted Conor McGregor to fight his next fight for. They don't just make those adjustments for any fighter. It took forever to get fights in Brazil and these places. We have Ronda Rousey fighting in Brazil, yes, because you have fighters like Aldo, Dos Anjos, and Anderson Silva growing the sport there. So now they've grown it so much that, yes, they're going to continue to produce Brazilian fighters, but I'm afraid to tell you that no one else was able to do that as well as Conor McGregor does. And he's not even fucking British. He just has that attachment to that audience. So I think he's a bigger asset. I never said that Dana White lost. And I never said that Conor McGregor won. I'm just saying that if you're mentioning to me that it's no skin off Dana White's nose, I just don't believe it. And no argument's going to make me believe it.
I think that if Dana White really felt, business-wise, that he needed Conor McGregor on that card,
You don't need him, but
then he would have
money.
backed down and said, you know what, after all this time that he'd be fighting at UFC 200. But instead, he's going to probably fight at UFC 202. And guess what? You're right on that. It's probably going to make more money. It's probably going to sell at an arena in Ireland. But I think what McGregor's already done is enough to the point that if McGregor wasn't on a card in Ireland today at UFC 198, if they moved it today, on the Friday before the fight, to Ireland, it would sell out in less than 2 hours. Because I think people have become big enough UFC fans across the globe.
Without Conor McGregor, they announce a fight tomorrow and it sells out in Ireland?
I think it could sell
No
out
way.
in Ireland.
Without Conor McGregor? No way.
I think it could. I think it would sell a lot of pay-per-view buys.
We'll
too.
agree to disagree, and
we
I
have
say
to.
that there's no way.
I'm not going to.
No one's going to turn up to see Nate Diaz fight anyone else in an arena in Ireland, unless it's Conor McGregor. And there will be fans out there, but I'd fucking go. We're talking about selling out. We're talking about just that mass audience.
It's not really the
that
well,
packs
actually, the one
Vegas.
thing that has been said is, like, of course it would sell out because the arena's. I don't think the arena's big enough for it to not sell out for a certain price. It's the pay-per-view buys. That's where the money's coming from. I don't think they make that much off the ticket prices. They make a ton off the pay-per-view. Conor McGregor versus Ronda Rousey is coming. Dude, Conor McGregor has to get ready for his fight against Floyd Mayweather, Francis.
That's what we need to wait for.
Comment below, guys.
It's
Like,
Friday.
favorite, subscribe. I've never fought with you.
We've never argued over a clip. Whoa! Look!
That's impressive. Comment below. Like, favorite, subscribe.
Whoa! That's impressive.